Here we are. Welcome to episode 110 of Random Thoughts. Special guest, Patrick Dillon.
Pleasure to be here.
Great to have you here. Did you know that you're not the only Patrick Dillon in the Core Advantage orbit?
I did find that out. Jacob apparently sent off some confidential documents to another Patrick
He
Dillon.
didn't. Don't worry about that.
No, James did tell me that this year. There's a new Pat Dillon on board.
Yeah, because I thought you were texting me this like a year ago, and I'm like, "Hey man, how you doing?" And then I was like, I realized that I was probably being overly friendly to someone I'd never met before. Pretty fun. So yeah. So thanks for coming on the podcast. I thought what we could do is I'd like to talk today about some actionable takeaways, things that you've learned through your studies and through your work, and also a little bit about your story as well, because I think it's a great story of how to rapidly become a hotshot, which you've done very well at.
Hardly say a hot shot, but appreciate that nonetheless.
Start at the start. We first met when you started the intern. You did the first internship in this building, didn't you?
Correct.
Yeah. So it was all fresh and shiny.
Brand new and still moving bits and pieces in and out, which was good fun.
Yeah. How did you take it back a step? So tell us about your studies and then how you came to the internship.
So if we go all the way back to post-high school, so I think finishing up at high school, my main aim was to make a lot of money, as most kids are. I wanted a number of houses and a couple of cars. That was always a goal. And so naturally I went into business and commerce and started at Monash doing economics and finance and got 2.5 years into a 3-year course and realised I hate economics and finance. I don't hate it, but it wasn't my passion.
It wasn't your passion.
I got to it's interesting. I got to the final stage of an internship at Deloitte, the team interviews, and just spent the day getting to know people who work at Deloitte, and I realised that probably wasn't for me, and I didn't want to spend my days in an office. And so I was kind of at this stage where I didn't really know what I wanted to do, and ironically, my dad was seeing an exercise physiologist at the time, and we had caught up a couple of times for a chat and over a coffee, and she suggested, maybe you should do exercise science. And so she led me down to do exercise science at Deakin.
Yep.
And in that time space, I had 6 months between degrees, and that's where I went to do my PT course.
Yep.
And so that kind of balanced out nicely. I had a bit of practical experience, and then I managed to get a job in a studio just before I started doing exercise science.
That must have helped your studies so much, having that sort of pre-marination of your brain with all this stuff. Like the concepts would have been so much more sticky.
Yep. So the course is obviously pretty basic, as most PT courses are, but in terms of being able to take that knowledge there and then the knowledge you get at uni and able to apply that straight away in a practical setting, like you're getting paid to do that, it helps massively. I think just in terms of coaching and communicating was a big thing, and obviously something I'm pretty grateful for. Yeah, looking back now,
that's we talk about serendipity.
Yeah,
the video, that's some serious serendipity right there.
It's funny how it worked out.
That's great. And so, did you continue PTing all the way through?
So I PT'd all the way until I basically moved to Sydney. A couple of years ago, and so I did exercise sports science at Deakin, and then ended up starting the internship here. You guys were pretty much my first internship in terms of S&C.
Yep.
I'd done a little bit of work experience down at the Sandy Dragons, just a couple of sessions here and there. But this was my real first internship and kind of like a real eye-opener into life outside of university. And you guys explain it so well, just seeing the matrix and the total picture, which is what you guys were really very good at pointing that out, and something I really took away from this internship.
Cool.
So that brought me down to Core Advantage, and I was here for almost 2 years or 18 months at least. Yeah. So I did the internship and then was lucky to stay on for the senior internship.
Yep.
And then
and then around the place a bit.
Yeah. So and then ended up at Carlton with the internship as part of Deakin's work placement hours. Got a gig there, and then that progressed onto an honours year the year after. And so naturally I just thought I'd be staying at Carlton for a few years longer.
Tell me about Carlton. So what was your honours?
So my honours was in rotations. So it was done through the university in Sydney, actually, UTS, University of Technology. And the head of sports science who oversaw the whole program, Aaron Coots, was my main supervisor, and Tom Kempton down at the Blues. And we looked at basically the influence of...
Is Aaron Coots also like the boss of ESSA now?
Yeah, he's on a number of boards. He's on ESSA. He runs the show at UTS. They've got a really good program up there.
He was speaking the other week. I was at a Deakin event, Sports Scene Unseen, and he was there on behalf of ESSA.
Yeah, he is everywhere.
Yeah,
He's
switch on guy.
Yeah, very switched on. Really good, great mentor of mine.
Yeah.
I owe a lot to him, actually. So
Yeah,
he's
that's
a ripper fella as well. He'll definitely tell you how it is.
Yeah,
pretty straight up.
He seemed very direct.
He's very direct and honest, which is great, which is what people need.
So you're doing that, and it rotated. You did different things, you were saying?
Yeah, so whilst I was at Carlton, obviously you have the full intern experience, everything from dietetics to strength and conditioning, sports science. That progressed into my second year, which is when I was doing my honours with another role at the VFL team.
Yep.
So I was doing GPS game day role there and helping out the main squad during the week.
Team were you at?
The Northern Blue, so the Carlton seconds team. Yeah. Okay. And got to the end of that 2 years and just expected to kind of waltz into a PhD position down the Blues. And was met with a pretty rude shock, I think, at the end of that experience. But looking back now, it's probably the best thing that's happened to me in terms of my progression, both personally and professionally. And it was interesting. I remember having the same very similar conversation with you at the end of our senior internship, where you were kind of hinting that S&C coaching probably wasn't for me, and looking at more of like a sciencey, and you actually suggested going back into a physio, which I ironically applied for. And then before I got the role at this honours position at Carlton, and that's kind of like how my career's progressed. Just trying to find my place and find a bit of a niche. Yeah. It's I've learned quite a bit through not getting positions that I think initially assumed I would.
We don't always know. We don't always know what we want to do. Like in your example, I thought I wanted to be a lawyer. Like when I finished high school, I was going to be a lawyer. Be awesome, you know. And luckily, I stuffed up a couple of exams and I missed out on getting into law. Yeah, you know, like I'm really grateful for that. You know,
it's just funny how initially at the time, and my mum always says, like, you know, one door closes, another one opens, and at the time you think that's a ridiculous cliche saying. It means absolutely nothing, but it's really true.
Because you seem a pretty low fit for Deloitte's.
Yeah,
like, they would not have excited you very much at all.
No, it didn't. It wasn't. The idea of making a lot of money, I think, was the main driver there, and it just that there was no passion, no appeal apart from that.
And so part of it is often we don't know what we want to do, and then also we don't have as clear a picture of ourselves of where we're going to fit. It takes us a while to work out where our niche is going to be, where we're going to fit into the world. So it took you a little while to sort of work out what was going to be a good fit for you.
Yeah. I can't say I've figured it out completely.
Yep.
And I'm on a current pathway of finishing my doctorate now, and I think I definitely still want to stay in sport, but in terms of what specialisation that is, I think
we'll get to that in a minute. But I think you've nailed it. I think you've whether strategically or accidentally positioned yourself in a really good spot. But I'm extremely lucky, and I've got a lot of niche.
Yeah, it's a good spot to be. I'm definitely not denying that. It's just interesting how my career's kind of gone all over the shop, and I think that's the key in any industry, but especially sport, is you just can't become complacent, and you can't just. I think the key word is just comfortable. That's something I got out of. I thought, assuming after my last year at Carlton, I assumed that I would just roll into a PhD position there, and there was only one position available in the end for two people.
Yeah.
And I remember speaking to my girlfriend at the time the day before, and I was about to meet Tom, he was going to tell me yes or no. And I said, look, the worst thing that could happen is that the other guy who I really like, Sam, is a ripper bloke, still catch up with him regularly. Worst thing that happen is he gets the role and I don't, and then I have no idea what I'm doing next. And so I had that conversation. It went exactly like that the next day. So Tom said, we've only got one position, and it was a combination of me spending probably too much time at the VFL and not enough time at the AFL. So I wasn't seen. I didn't have much of a place at AFL.
You hadn't made them feel like you were indispensable, because that's part of it, isn't it? Yeah. Like that they go, we there's kind of almost like a sunk cost thing of we can't let that person go. They're part of here now. Yeah. It's because you're there, you're less.
And I think the biggest thing was I wasn't hungry enough. I just assumed that naturally, I think I'm quite a smart guy. I pick things up pretty quickly. Yeah. And I just assumed that if I just kept on doing that and kept on, being a nice guy and speaking to people. And I think socially, growing up, I also struggled quite a bit socially. I'm quite, what's the word I'm looking for? Just introverted. Yeah. Always been introverted. Like I'm a good thinker, but I just can't express that, or never used to be able to express those thoughts. And that was probably a part of it, that I didn't express to them enough that I wanted the position as badly as the other guy did. And it was the hardest conversation I've ever had with someone, and but also the most kind of like revealing. I learned a lot about myself in the weeks following that, and just what I wanted.
Were you pretty flat afterwards?
I was flat is an understatement. So I just remember I spent the rest of the night in tears, just thinking that my career in sport was over, and I was back to square one, and I hadn't achieved anything, and I still had to finish up my honours. I hadn't even finished my honours paper at that stage.
So you had to grind that out after that?
So I had to grind that out. Well, I was actually most productive I've been probably in those 2 months following that chat. That it's when I really learned that this is, it's a passion of mine. It's where I want to be, and I think you kind of have to go through those hard conversations and experience that to actually appreciate what you want. Because I think up until then, I just was in a bit of cruise mode, just kind of accepted things as they were, and I didn't have to chase anything. And it was kind of just like, I'll just do this. And then naturally I picked up that role and that role and that role. And it's about the conversation that we had. I remember here sitting in the office, and then that conversation happened within the space of, I think, 6 months. So I had 2 pretty hard conversations about where I just assumed I'd progressing. But yeah,
they're good. They're gifts, though, aren't they?
I think that, looking back, they're not at the time. I can certainly attest to that. I thought as dramatic as it sounds, like one of the worst things that could have happened to me, but turns out like it was literally the best thing.
Well, I mean, the worst thing that ever happened to me professionally was when I was sacked. I wasn't called a sacking; it was like a contract not renewed from the Rangers in the WBL. And the way it was handled was, we went championship in my 4 years, championship runners up 4th, and then they basically cleared staff and out of the 4th when we finished 4th. Yeah, and I wasn't expecting that at all. But friends of mine, like, were in Dawson Kidgel. Did he ever lecture you, Dawson?
I think the name sounds familiar.
When I bumped into him, he was like, "Have you been sacked yet?" I was like, "No." He's like, "You're gonna get sacked soon." Just so if you're in S&C, you will get sacked.
Yeah, I've heard that before.
So it was one of those things where it hurt so much at the time, but it was the best. Like, core advantage wouldn't exist in the format we see it today if I hadn't been sacked, because I said afterwards, I'm never going to allow someone to be in a position to do that to me again, ever. Like, it was really a pivotal moment. And so then every single thing I did after that was like, the standard was, is this the best in the world? Yeah. Because if it's the best in the world, I reckon I'm pretty safe. Yeah. And if it isn't, not good enough, So those can be really useful experiences.
You just keep coming back to that conversation and those moments. When you're feeling a bit flat or you're feeling a bit unmotivated, you come back to those conversations. Like, I've got to keep moving, got to keep progressing.
It's fuel for the fire.
Yeah, exactly.
So you had the conversation, you then finished off your honours, and then how does that take from there into GWS?
So there was a position that came up about probably a month after I finished up at the Blues, and there was an option of either staying on board with the VFL team or applying elsewhere. And I just went on to apply elsewhere just to see if there was anything else out there. And there was a role up at Sydney at GWS, and obviously at the time, being a strong Swan supporter, I was a little bit. It was still a bit odd, feeling uncomfortable about this, but naturally, it was a great opportunity. It was the next progression for me in terms of study as well. I wanted to keep the academic side going as well. And from an honours, you naturally either do a master's or a PhD, and there was an opportunity to do a PhD. And my mentor at the Blues, Aaron Coots, knew the people involved in that position, and was able to talk me up pretty highly. And then went through a pretty tough interview process. It was pretty fun. It was over Skype, and
Skype interviews are so hard. I've been on the employer end of quite a lot of Skype interviews. I hate them.
Yeah. So David Joyce, who's now a good mentor of mine and obviously a friend, being at the Giants for the last couple of years, he's very famous for grilling people and putting people under pressure, because in sport you have to deal with that pressure, and you've got to be able to not get flustered and not get too emotional when things get tough, and it does certainly get tough in elite sport. And I just remember I went into the first interview and I was in a polo shirt and just my underwear. And I just thought, this is the only way I'm going to relax. I'm just not going to take this too seriously. And it's funny, I only told people this a couple of months ago. But
so you're like a cliche, the newsreader.
Yeah, exactly right. And that was just my mentality. It's like, regardless of what happens today, I'm just going to try and enjoy the process, learn from it. And I didn't get flustered. Whereas from reports of other people, they got quite flustered and got quite emotional. And it was a super hard interview. And I think I was questioned from an academic side. So Rick Lovell, who's now my PhD supervisor, grilled me in terms of academics.
So how many people were interviewing you?
So there are two people.
Two people over Skype?
Over Skype. And they were in two different...
So did you have two? So you're looking at two?
I've got two. My uni professor there. I've got David Joyce there, who obviously I've admired and read his books, and I was like, geez, it's a big deal. Yeah. And then I've got me, and I'm looking at these two people, and they're asking, going question to question, and grilling me at the same time. It was intense, but I just didn't take it.
Just relaxed and enjoyed it. Could let the game come to you.
Exactly right. And
what kind of questions did they ask?
So it was a lot of, from the academic side, it was where are your strengths, the classic interview questions, where are your strengths, where are your weaknesses. And I think what I did well is I have a lot of weaknesses in terms of academics. I'm no good at doing data and stats and that, and that was a real working point. I'm slowly getting the hang of it now. But I emphasized that in my interview. I said, I'm a good writer. I can write all day, but in terms of when it comes to stats and data, I'm not great at it. It's something I really want to progress at. And then in terms of...
that's great transparency.
Yeah,
that buys a lot with me. If someone is transparent about their weakness, not in a self-serving way, or my only weakness is I'm too much of a perfectionist.
Yeah, exactly. It's just honesty.
Yeah.
People can pick that up really well, I think, in an interview. And then from a high performance side, it was just basically how you deal with conflict. I think coming from you do a couple of years at an elite sport, everyone kind of understands the processes and how you do things and how you fill up, how you organize GPS and how you do piss testing and your hydration testing and stuff like that. You pick up the skills, but in terms of how you deal with conflict and how you deal in high pressure situations, which is why DJ Joyce was grilling me quite hard, like what would you do in this situation? What would you do in that situation? And it's all about, my strategy was just in those situations, remain calm and always ask up. So don't be afraid to ask too many questions of your superiors, your mentors. And I think they appreciated that. And it was the second interview. Joyce.
How long did that go for?
So the first interview was an hour.
That's a long hour.
Yeah. And so I was in, I then flew to Adelaide, see my girlfriend at the time, and then got the call just before I boarded back to Melbourne saying, I've made it to the second round. And it was down to 3 people. And so DJ went on the attack in the second interview, it's fair to say.
And that was in person?
So, no, both were on Skype. I was still in Melbourne and they were in Sydney at the time.
Yeah.
And so the second interview, it was more about, let's really put this guy on the pump. So DJ came in, first thing he said was, there's 3 people interviewing, you're the third one. So you're currently in third position.
Wow.
We've got 2 people ahead of you. And really...
that wasn't true.
It wasn't true. So apparently I was number 1 at that stage, but he wanted to see how I reacted. And I felt like he was saying, you're a long way off. 1 and 2 position are miles ahead of you. You have to impress today.
Wow.
And so did
your heart rate?
I was still in my underwear at the time, obviously. But it's just like, oh geez, I don't know what I'll have to. I'm going to pull out some miracle. So it was kind of also like, okay, well, I'm third. I've got really nothing to lose here. If I don't make it, then
it's kind of you can reframe that. And you can relax.
That's how I kind of approached it.
That's some good rapid reframing.
Which was how I kind of went through that rest of that interview, and he went on to pretend his Wi-Fi was no good. So then he was blowing up at me about not organising good Wi-Fi. And I was confusing at the time because I literally just spoken to my parents 10 minutes before, who were overseas, and my Wi-Fi had no issues whatsoever. Right. And so he's there pretending my Wi-Fi is no good and I should have organised this earlier. And just all these little mental games. He's notorious for mental game. He loves a good mental game. DJ. It's pretty funny now. We joke about it quite a bit.
Yeah.
But then it was quite stressful, and I was lucky to say that I obviously did okay in the interview.
I think there's so many layers in which that's really clever, though, because when you get the position, like if you put someone under the blowtorch like that and then you give them a position, or like you would have, the day you knew you had it, your confidence would have gone up by about 300% because like, I made it through that.
Yeah.
It's like,
I can make it through anything. I can get through
That's amazing. And so tell us about your role and your PhD.
So I've been up to the Giants for 2 years now, and the PhD process is basically 3 years.
Yeah.
So you start from having no idea to hopefully being an expert in your so-called field, whichever topic. Yep. So that's the goal of doing a doctorate. And so I'm just finished my second year, and as part of that, the main topic is in load monitoring, which is obviously a real global term, and it means a lot, and it's quite a bit of a buzzword at the moment. And so my main focus
it's not going to stop being a buzzword for about another 100 to 1,000 years.
At least. It's kind of seen as a sports science role at the moment. It's like it's load monitoring, it's injury prevention. And that's kind of where my PhD is going. And the question will be based around how we monitor our speed zones and use GPS to analyse load.
Yeah. And so in terms of the way you fit in with the club, so you're their in-house expert on that stuff? Like what's the day-to-day?
So
take me through that.
My role is basically, my main role at the moment is GPS, and I run all, this year I'll take over the whole GPS system.
Yep.
The guy who was above me, James McBrien's now at the Newcastle Knights, and as happens in sports, people move on, you progress. It's naturally how that occurs. So my role will be head of all GPS, and in terms of that, I'll also manage a bit of Smarter Base, which is our load monitoring. Our
AMS.
Basically we store all our data and I'll monitor those reports and whatnot. And then so that's I should technically be at uni 2 days a week and at the club 3 days, including travel. But obviously, as the season progresses, I'll end up being 6 days at the club and maybe 1 day a fortnight at uni. So it's just kind of, it's about getting that balance right, which I was really good in year one. And then last year I kind of fell away from the uni side and probably focused a little bit too much on work.
I mean, it's not like it's laziness. Like you get swept up in doing your work at a sports club because it's such a mission.
Yeah.
You know, and then you can turn around a year later and you go, oh wow, I've really, I know from experience myself, like you find although your allocation of hours might have some element of balance, like intensity of your thinking is all around the sports club.
Yeah. And then when you get out of that sports club, out of that bubble, you just want to not think.
Yeah.
Because you're constantly on all day, every day. And you're right, you're on the same mission, same drive. Everyone's involved in it. And you just get to this point where you just, I can't take a day to study. I've got to take a day to get recovered mentally and freshen up in order to go again the next day.
And so that's why we've had the pleasure of your company in our gym. That's why you come down to
that's exactly right. So this is our
work and train here a tiny bit on the side.
Yeah. So it's actually been really good to get out of Sydney and come home. My parents have been away, so I've been home alone the last 4 weeks. So it's kind of just been my way to refresh. And I was speaking to people from work yesterday. And I'm excited to go back to work. Whereas I think I left Sydney just not burnt out. I think it's a bit of a cliche term, but just in need of a break. And I think the players do the same thing and all staff go through the same thing. You get to end of the season, you just need a new stimulus.
Yeah. I reckon the burnt out word's often wrong because burnt out implies, I agree, it's not I feel like we almost need a word for having a flat battery.
Yeah.
Like it's more that, isn't it?
You just need a recharge, basically.
Yeah, because you're still just as passionate. You're just kind of tired.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it was one of my best mates. We caught up as soon as I got back to Melbourne, and he expressed it really well. Is that when you're in the bubble and you're in the moment, you don't appreciate the work that you do, and then you go out of that and you tell people about your role and what you do, and everyone's like, "Oh, that's so cool! That's so cool!" And I'll come here, and it's so refreshing to be here in like a private setting, completely different. I'm able to bounce off ideas off you guys. We had a really good chat when I came here, and probably for 30 minutes about how you guys do things and about how we do things, and it gets you excited about your job again. And that was something I didn't intend to do. It was just kind of a natural progression of not wanting to work out in a Globo gym when I came home to Melbourne.
How bad is a Globo? When you've been used to training in a club gym or a place like ours, a regular gym's just shocking.
I just had, as soon as I went in there, I was like, I've got to call Durham and Jacob and try and get down there. And it's worked out really well.
That's
like
great.
I'm more passionate about my job going back to Sydney just because I've been having another perspective and a refreshing.
That's cool.
Basically.
So I'm going to ask you, I'm not going to probe too much, but I'm going to ask you questions where you might have to diplomatically say, not comfortable answering that because you're, in an elite sporting setting. So don't feel compelled to have to answer anything.
Yeah.
But you have been, the program had some injury issues.
Yep.
One of the hardest things when you're in a situation like that is the bubble all of a sudden can be a fairly tense bubble. How did you cope with all that? What observations do you have around that? I'm pretty curious. I think one of the most important mild superpowers, if you're operating in elite sporting context, is the ability to still maintain your positivity and optimism and just an even keel, even when stuff appears to be going off the rails a bit around you. I think that's a really important trait. Hard to develop until you're actually in that situation. Your personality is you're pretty sort of equanimous. You're
very laconic.
I think, and that's really well suited for those situations. Tell us about what you learned and any thoughts. Any thoughts you're comfortable sharing?
Yeah, no, it was certainly in terms of, so I've been at the Giants for 2 years and obviously in AFL for 4 years. Last year was my toughest year personally. And it's so funny, you tell people, oh, it's such a hard year when you're really, my role has little to no impact on the overall scheme of things. But everything you kind of take on board, you take on the emotion, the negative emotion, the positive emotion, the highs and the lows. And then when you have a lot of outside influence, questioning your program and directly calling out some of your staff members, so your mates, and saying they should be sacked and you should.
People are brutal too.
Yeah, it's just the business. I think it's sports. So AFL, especially in Australia, is so big and there's so much money involved that everyone gets paid to have an opinion, and I respect that, and they're entitled to an opinion. And it's the key is, and it kind of galvanized us as a group, is you don't let that bother you internally. And we have such a good group of staff that all look out for each other, and it's something we kind of preach. It's a family club, and I think all clubs like to say they're the family club, but we've only been around for 7 or 8 years. Everyone pretty much in my department's moved from interstate to work in Sydney.
So you're all kind of expats.
Yeah, so we're all, and most of the players are the same. So we're all kind of moved away. We've all got family outside of it, so we kind of hang out a lot with each other.
So it's more of a bubble than the average bubble.
Yeah, it's quite a bubble, you could say.
That's nice, though, isn't it? Because to me, even if things are going badly, if you've got good group harmony, you can do anything. If your group's got, there's that. My favourite quote in all of sports by Rick Charlesworth, the Hockey Roos coach, and really smart guy. The single biggest source of competitive advantage for a sports team is their level of connectedness.
Yeah,
I love it, and I think it's the same for business teams, any team whatsoever.
Yeah, I agree, and the same thing goes for trust. I think at times like that, if you don't trust the person who's sitting next to you, then it's quite hard to do your job. And it was certainly, when you ask about how I dealt with the year, it was making sure that I switched off when I left the club, and then I didn't. Like, it's a lot easier in Sydney. I can't imagine how hard it'd be in Melbourne teams, but no one cares about AFL in Sydney.
That's good. It's kind of a gift,
you don't read about it in papers. People don't talk about it when you're out in public. They want to know about NRL or union.
It's like you tell them what they do, and they're like, "Oh, that's nice." Whereas in Melbourne, they'd be like, "You'd be cornered."
Yeah, exactly right. It's a different coming home here. That's probably part of it as well. You come home and everyone wants to know exactly what you do, and they're super excited. Whereas in Sydney, no one really cares. So it's kind of refreshing in that respect. But I think at the end of the day, it just comes back to looking after the person who sits next to you. And the same, we all work in the same office. We're a pretty close group. We're all about the same age, and so
that's cool.
I think it's about looking after other staff.
And was that culture? Is that a explicitly articulated thing, or is that just more everyone just has kind of picked up the vibe of?
Yeah, well, coming from 2 different clubs, I think both clubs preach the same thing in terms of it's a family club. You look after the people in your office and the players, but I think just naturally being such a small club, and again being all expats essentially, it just kind of happens organically, and I think I can't underestimate how great it's been for me the last 2 years just working with that unit.
That's awesome. Yeah, you can do it. If you've got a good crew, you can do anything. And you can enjoy doing it.
Yeah, exactly right. Well, I think the enjoyment's a thing. If you don't enjoy what you do every day, it makes it hard to go to work.
That's my number one thing here is put together a team of people that are amazing at what they do and love working together.
Yeah.
And then, whatever challenges get thrown up at you, you'll handle them with grace under pressure, and you'll have fun, and you'll attract more people to your company that are like that as well. So
and it's what DJ preaches every time he hires a new person. It's about finding people with character and who would fit in with the group, rather than, we can always upskill people.
Yeah.
And I feel like you find the right person who fits in that group, you can go a long way with them.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. So let's talk a little technical. Load monitoring, huge area. And it's one of those things where I think, as you're now a subject matter expert at that stuff.
I wouldn't say I'm an expert, but I'm the goalie in my PhD.
You spent a lot of time thinking about it, and you've spent a lot of time operating in that space. I want to know what you think of RPEs.
Yeah, so it's interesting. It depends.
So occasionally we have really interested parents and non-athlete, even for some of the athletes who might know what RPEs. So rate of perceived exertion, and it's just a rating out of 10 of how hard you thought the session was, and that's multiplied by how many minutes you did the session, and then you get a number.
So it's the most simplified version of load monitoring you can do. It works at all levels. I think that's the value of it.
Yeah.
It's quite a simple process, subjective based. So you touch that, and also with your time, there's a little bit of objectiveness in that as well. I think RPE is great. I think it's simple. It's validated.
Because it's validated, but I just find in Australia, everyone just gives himself a 6 or a 7.
Yeah, and that's the issue with taking. So RPE can be so fickle that if it's not taken the right way, you don't get anything out of it. And it's an issue that we find because our RPEs are all done on the phone outside of the club.
Yeah.
Whereas at previous places I've been, it was all done on a pad in front of you. As soon as the player will come off the track, you'll take the RPE straight on board. So as long as you do it properly and effectively, you can get value out of it. But if it's just a number, then everyone puts the same number every time they train. There's no sensitivity. You can't get anything really out of it. So I think RPE is a good method because it's simple and it's useful, but it's the way how you do it. It's super important.
It's interesting too when you have the coaches. I really like that when you have the coach rate their, so the players will rate their number, and then the coach will rate what they think the session was. How often that can be, in my experience, quite out of whack.
Yeah.
Like the players would be like, "That was a really hard session." The coach would be like, "I rate that an easy session," and then the reverse.
Yeah, and naturally, as you go on, you'll realise that some players are almost hypochondriac or hypersensitive,
more sensitive to load,
more sensitive to load, and other players aren't. Or at the end of the day, every player wants to train every training and play every game, so they'll learn ways to manipulate that system. So it comes back to having a relationship with the player and being able to understand, not just from an RPE, but also just being able to talk to them and understand where they're at.
So if you were starting out at a local footy club, would you use RPE?
Yes. Yeah. I think that's the most simple way to do it.
Yeah.
So I think if you're at a local footy club, there's not much value in wasting a lot of money on GPS. You're more worth investing time in developing your staff and starting off with simple methods so you know are effective and work, and then build on that. So
you do RPE. What else would you do?
I'd probably just simply start with RPE and time. In terms of load monitoring, so if we're talking about a really junior level, get the basics right in terms of have some really good fitness tests, some strength tests.
Would you yo-yo these days for footy?
Yeah, it's actually funny. My first paper is on using the 30-15, which is a new fitness test that basically the Martin Boucher has come up with, and it's essentially 30 seconds of work, 15 seconds of recovery. It correlates quite well with maximal aerobic speed.
Nice.
It's slightly overestimates it, so you've got to take that into account. But it's a simple method that we've started using now at the club as our yo-yo test. So almost similar in a way, but it's just a nice, easy progression up.
And what do you like more about it? What's its
the issue with the yo-yo
proposition? So
the issue with the yo-yo test is it's quite based on your change of direction ability.
Yep.
Because it doesn't slow down. You kind of
it gets really it's intense eccentric forces as it's getting faster. Like when you're really having to load up and change. Yeah.
Definitely. So we'll couple our 30-15, which is similar to the yo-yo, and though it does involve change of direction, but it's a nice steady progression up, and it correlates well with previous research. We find that we'll do a 3K or a 2K time trial as well. And it's, at the end of the day, it's not sports specific. 2Ks, you never run 2Ks in an AFL game, and that's what people argue. But in terms of the coaches love it because it says to them, has this player prepared over the off season? Have they gone away and done nothing?
When I was younger, I was really dismissive of it, and I was wrong because I was straight on the sports specific science side, and it's like, but there's so much their 2K time trial tells you about. It tells how they've been eating, like have they lost body composition, are they out of shape, are they carrying body fat that's slowing them down, have they been training, and it tells so much more about the intent as well. Like anyone can run faster over two. If you're putting the work in, you will improve your 2K time.
Yeah.
Like it's such a simple.
It's an effort-based.
Such an effort-based thing. Yeah. Even if your time is still because you're not built for running 2K fast, even if it's slower than some gazelle, it's still you're comparing yours to yours.
So it's on an individual level. That's what's really good.
What kind of times do some of the guys do?
So for 3K, so the last 2 years we've done 3Ks. This year we'll be doing 2K.
Okay.
There's no real rationale behind changing it, but our best runners will run their 3K in 9 minutes.
It's pretty quick.
9:30. So that's kind of the benchmark, and that's obviously the thing about an AFL group, you'll have tall, big guys on one end and the small, skinny runners on the other, and it's about kind of finding.
What's the slower end of your band? So you've got the bigger, heavier guys. What are they?
Probably 11 minutes, I think, our slowest guys.
I think people underestimate how fit the big units are as well. That's still pretty impressive.
Definitely. I would struggle. I can't run that. So
yeah, I'm built for that stuff. Like I weigh 65 kilos. And, I'm not doing that.
They're impressive for people who are 200 centimeters, 110, 115 kilos can still move like that. It's really impressive.
Do you think when people talk about AFL, I think it's the most exciting and interesting challenge for a strength and conditioning coach. I think it's such a fascinatingly diverse amount of abilities you're trying to create.
Yep.
Do you think the emphasis is, it goes in swings, like for a while, it was like everyone needs to get as massive as possible. Then it goes to everyone needs to be as fast as possible. Where do you think that pendulum is at the moment? Is it anywhere, or is it more settled down to being a bit more scattered between clubs?
I think it's settled in terms of everyone needs to be super fit. And I think the two clubs I've been at, you can get a person to a certain fitness level quite easily. So there's a benchmark there. You can get them as fast as you want. You can get them as fit as you want. The way the game's progressing now in terms of strategy, it's about skill, about how you execute under pressure and execute under fatigue. And so it's about combining that fitness aspect of it and that skill development. That's kind of quite the art of programming. And when you sit down and you plan pre-season, it's about ticking all those boxes in terms of your fitness competencies, but then also touching on that skill side, which is, I think, is getting only more important. Because I think the human body naturally will progress to a point where you are fit and you are fast.
You hit that threshold.
Yeah. It's like the buckets analogy. You fill your buckets up with fitness and strength.
Yeah.
But it's about that finding. And the best teams of the last 10 years have been your Hawthorns, who are not necessarily the fittest team, but they're the best in terms of skills.
Executing under pressure.
Executing under pressure.
It's sometimes, I think, you can work really hard on the physical side of it to buy yourself an extra half a second doing things. But you can also work really hard on spending that extra half second in a much better way because you've got that composure.
Especially under pressure and under fatigue and mental fatigue and that whole aspect of the psychology of sport. I think that's like almost where our industry is progressing, and that's like an uncharted field in terms of the psychology side of it.
Yeah. So baseline level for grassroots sport, doing your RPEs, you record it. You can make up a simple spreadsheet with a line graph. Like you can make up fancy ones. There are apps you can use. It's a pretty straightforward approach, and it's a useful thing to do. At the pointy end, I remember seeing the spreadsheets that Dr. Darren Burgess, and I'm not talking at a school, like he publicly showed them at a seminar. And he had this wonderful thing of an array of various metrics. So he had the Burjo score, which was the score he gave the session out of 10. He had the amount of minutes spent in zone 6, the high-speed running. He had a heart rate variability score and a predicted VO2 max from a partial yo-yo test. And he would look at all those and balance them out. That seems to be the only way you can get really good results, because you actually getting an input, maybe 5 inputs, and then you can make a considered assessment based on those. What are your thoughts about what the best inputs are? And
So the things that we'll focus on in terms of planning a session is you can't go past using total distance as a measure. You want a nice
how many meters you've run.
Exactly. But in terms of intensity, we look at work rates, so meters per minute, and then what every club will look at is their sprint or high speed running or very high speed running. Everyone kind of has a different reference point. But in terms of that's kind of where we focus our planning on, is that high speed, the very high speed running, which is generally above anywhere between 20 and 24 kilometers, depending on what club you're at. And that's kind of our
pretty
focus.
Quick.
Yeah, that's quite fast.
Yeah.
And I think when you're working in there, you just assume players will get to a certain, you just expect that to happen. But it's actually those guys are moving to get up to that pace and consistently. And some players will do 2Ks worth of sprinting, as we call it. So above 23 kilometers over a session, which is quite, they're moving.
Because that was often a challenge, wasn't it? Where the problem was that once every 6 to 7 days, you would have this really high speed, high stress stimulus of running. But then everyone's wrapped up in cotton wool during the week for fear of hurting them. And then all you're actually doing is making them more vulnerable, because you're spacing the stimulus out too far. And so now the emphasis is on getting that some dose of that high speed work in. How consistently, how many times a week do you think players should be getting good high speed sessions in?
So there's been some really good literature around that in terms. Shane Malone's done a lot of work into high speed exposures during the week leading up to a game. And it's really important that players hit around about 85 to 95. There's kind of like a sweet spot. Again, it's arbitrary in terms of we're trying to touch that speed during the week. So we'll have basically our sessions will be 3 sessions during the week before a game. The Tuesday session, so we'll play assuming Saturday.
So Monday, so assuming you've played Saturday, take us through a week.
So Sunday is a complete day off.
Yeah.
Boys don't do anything.
No recovery.
They'll do their own recovery.
But that's on their own back.
On their own. So we trust our guys to do their own recovery, and they're really good at that. So I think it's something that if you encourage them to do on their own and they buy in, which our guys do, I don't think that should be mandatory. I think you back these
treat them like adults.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right. I think that's the best way to look at it. And then Monday they'll come in for a light jog, which will generally be depending on how they pull up.
Yeah.
And
so what would a light jog entail?
So literally sometimes it's a little 10-minute game of soccer just to kind of get something different. Like it's short, we're not sprinting, we're not asking them to run any high speeds or anything, or they'll just do a couple laps. It's literally that simple. Just to get the blood flow going.
Tiny dose of blood flow and really gentle ground reaction force just to get their muscles working.
And then they'll do an upper body lift in the afternoon.
Okay. Yep.
And then Tuesday they'll start their first kind of training for the week, which will be generally just a 40-minute light skill session. Again, we're not trying to hit max speed in that session, ticking through the moments, getting more skill involvement. Yep. And then Wednesday we'll have our main training. So that's our big one. We'll try and hit high speed numbers. Yeah. So that's where we kind of gear our whole week around that main training, getting boys ready for the Wednesday session, making sure they tick all the competencies off during that session until they're ready to go for the Saturday. Thursday will be a full day off. They'll do their own recovery at home. And then Friday we'll just have a light captain's run, as people call it. So that'd be 20-minute session, just again a kick and giggle, making sure they're switched on, they'll have meetings, and then they're out of there before lunch. Which
was a revolutionary thing, the captain's run. And it was who was the coach, the sports science, I'm letting myself down here, from Adelaide, who brought it in, and people were like, what are you talking about? You can't do anything the day before the game. It's like, no, we can get out and run a bit. It'll actually be really good for them.
Yeah, I think it just switches them on, because you're getting that day off on the Thursday, come back in, you kind of get the body going again and getting ready to go.
That's a great sounding week. Yeah. That sounds like a really smart, that sounds to me like the perfect week.
So we try and keep that pretty consistently, depending, but then based on the fixture. So 6-day break versus an 8-day break. So that's weeks obviously based on. It's not going to affect your Wednesday, is it? It doesn't. So that's the plan, is we always get that main session in a couple of days before training.
And so I'm apologies, listeners, I'm going to nerd out a little longer here. And so in terms of your lower body lifting, how do you balance that out?
So our lower body lifts will be our key lift on the Wednesday as well. So in main training.
So
that's after training. So boys will come on field and they'll have 2-hour break, grab lunch, do their main weights. So they'll do a lower body, a full body session on the Tuesday and the Wednesday. Yeah. But the main session will be the Wednesday. Yeah. That's what I try and hit most.
So the Tuesday might be just some light lower body.
Yeah. So just kind of get the body moving. Yeah. In order to hit the Wednesday.
And you're getting it moving without impact, which is great. So that when you want to go, you can go, and you've got a chance to notice if things are sore a little bit. I think there's a diagnostic sort of screening element to good training as well. That you can notice, that's really sore. I need to get that looked at.
Yeah, you pick that up as you go. And kind of that's how we progress our week. We build up slowly, hit our key values on the Wednesday, ramp down the Thursday, so they're primed and ready to go for the Saturday.
That's awesome. Tell us, what do you think's often? It's all about what's over the horizon. Where do you think we're getting better and better with metrics? We're measuring everything. We're measuring acceleration, deceleration, which is really stressful. Yeah. What do you think's the next big thing? So if phase 1 was let's categorize athletes on how they're feeling, phase 2 was let's categorize them plus let's measure the amount of running they're doing and accelerations and so forth. What's the next big thing to really know? Because what you want is you want a time machine. You want the ability to predict 3 weeks into the future, we're about to overload that athlete too much or we're underloading them too much. What do you think is the next big thing?
That's a good question. I think in terms of sports science, there's been a lot of recent papers and opinions about we're becoming too sciencey in terms of we're losing that touch with the players. And I agree to a certain extent.
Darren Burgess calls it the Australian recovery culture.
Yeah, exactly. Well, exactly right.
Recovery.
And I think, you've had a number of other big names. Craig Duncan said it a number of times in terms of where sports science is now a handbrake rather than we're progressing, we're building performance. And I think that's kind of naturally happened with the whole acute to chronic, the whole acute to chronic ratio, which you guys have touched on here before. So I won't go into detail about that. But looking at injury prevention and sports science, and you hear about BT in the media with football, and he says, they're killing the game because they're holding people back.
Brian Taylor.
Yeah, Brian Taylor, as everyone understand. So I think naturally, because of that whole idea of acute to chronic, we're seen as we're just these rehab guys, and then we're trying to stop people getting injured. I think naturally, it's kind of like every industry moves in waves, and I think you come back eventually to a point where we'll go to pushing them forward and progressing and working on performance rather than a rehab side of it. I think naturally we can measure everything. I don't know how much more we can measure. We've got everything kind of ticked off. Eventually wearables will become just another thing. It'll be in the clothes and the jumpers, and that's kind of where it's progressing. And it can't be someone's full-time job is to measure stuff. So it's about taking the data that you have and then syncing that into a program that pushes people forward rather than in terms of injury prevention.
I think it's such a subtle but important paradigm shift, such as kind of a flip of it, because you can think about the acute to chronic workload ratio stuff as we've got to make sure we don't work them too hard this week. Yeah. That's one way people interpret it. But the other way is, and so that's the ceiling of the workload you're doing. And so just for those who haven't heard it before, it's basically simplified. It's what work are you doing this week? How much output are you going to do as compared to a rolling average of the previous 3 weeks? It's pretty standard. And I think how I look at it is it's actually more about maintaining the floor. So I'm not as worried because your ceiling is only higher in relation to your floor. Yep. So it actually should be a thing that's helping you to push them along to the encouragement should be, let's make sure we keep that volume up because the volume is actually protective.
Where it's sold as an injury prevention. So most of the research the money is in preventing injuries. Yeah. And that's the key for any good program.
And so it attracts people that are probably too down that
preventive. There's a good word, preventive. Almost just they're too focused on preventing prevention. I don't know. There's a buzzword there somewhere, but I just can't pick it.
Okay. So you think that's maybe that it's not so much a technology change as a paradigm change?
I don't think
push for performance harder.
I can't see technology progressing any great leaps and bounds coming forward in terms of our industry, but I think it's changing again. So initially, as you start with sports science and the way that the history of sports science progressed, is initially it was all about pushing, and then
pushing till they die.
Yeah, exactly right. Trying to grab a basket of eggs, throw it all against the wall.
Yeah, Eastern European.
Eastern European, and see which ones stick and which ones don't break.
Yeah.
And then now it's kind of, since sports becomes such a business, every player who misses a game is worth a certain amount of money. And so, it's all about preventing injury. Yeah. So I think it'll naturally come back around to more of the coaching, more of the art and science of sports science, and combining the numbers with your ability to coach and ability to push players onto that kind of next.
So, So for me, as a strength coach, as a strength and conditioning coach, what I would most like, so one of my key metrics, like working with the Boomers, was always games lost to injury. So if one player has an injury that costs them 2 games, for that season, you've now had 2 games missed to injury, and that's a really good overall stat to track your whole group, because less severe injuries, a better job rehabbing them plays into that stat. And so if you're doing a really good job, you can have a really low score. We once 3 seasons ago had 0 games, like not a single player missed a single game in the entire season. Yeah. And that was like we didn't win that year. No one remembers it, but that was one of the highlights of my career. I was like, we played the perfect season kind of. But really what we need is, that's one stat that we should be judged on, is almost like some sort of cumulative work output successfully engaged by that player. Isn't like that player did this amount of units of work healthily this year. Is there a metric that lends itself to, it's kind of like you'd really like to be able to talk about how much horsepower you improved a person with, and then just how much horsepower they were able to express.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think it's really easy to do in sort of maybe a track and field based setting or a private sector where it's quite easy to track, and you see straight away if your work has been successful or not.
Oh, CGS Sports, centimeters, grams, seconds.
Exactly right.
Like swimming,
sprinting. So if you improve by 10th of a second, oh, geez, my programs work perfectly.
Yeah.
Whereas if you look at a sport like AFL,
yeah,
as you said before, there's so many things that come into a win and a loss. And even if you just focus on injury, there's so many factors that come into that. And so it's so hard to grade your work over the season. And ultimately, at the end of the day, as unfortunate it might be, we're graded on wins and losses. And
often when you win, you run less as well.
Yeah,
right?
exactly
like
right.
If you're in control of the game, you might look at a winning team and go, oh, you guys aren't doing a very good job on the physical side of it because they're actually running less. It's like, no, they're able to run more, but...
So there's been some good research in that, and they found that the losing teams run more purely because they're chasing.
Yeah.
And the skillful teams that hit their targets don't have to run as much.
I think of it like tennis. Like if I'm playing Roger Federer, I am running all over that court, and he's just pretty much going to be standing still.
Yeah.
It's like that, isn't it? Yeah.
So I think that's the thing with sport, and that's kind of what I love, is that no other industry is graded week to week.
Yeah.
It's hard to say. Like, we're reviewed weekly, and I mean, you can look at it as just one game, but basically you build your whole week up to win that weekend. And if you lose, then you think, geez, I haven't had a great week. But you could have the perfect with the best week ever, and you just have a bad day. And players go through the same thing as staff, and we kind of don't separate ourselves from that.
It's so interesting. We last season we lost the grand final, and my feeling afterwards was like, well, that was a waste of a year. Like, I felt like the whole year was a waste because we lost.
Yeah, I completely sympathise with that. We've made the finals the last 2 years when I've been there. With prelim last year, and this preceding season we made a semi-final, and you lose. As soon as you lose that game, it's like, got to go back to the start. Got to go back through the 25 or 30-week preseason, and
it's a hard grind.
Yeah.
Lindsay Gay's famous basketball coach, he had a phrase, I don't know if you've heard of it, Operation Successful, Patient Died. And often I think it's really good to think of. We actually did everything right. It's just that it didn't happen to work out.
And it just comes back to the cliche saying, it's never as good as it seems, it's never as bad as it seems. And that's kind of how you have to view each week. I feel like it's the best way to, in terms of cope with the roller coaster of emotion, and you really enjoy the wins and being a part of that winning culture and that team. And then when you lose, yes, naturally you're going to go back and kind of review every little thing you do. But ultimately, I think you just got to kind of enjoy the process and the highs and lows. And that's as frustrating as each week can be. I love it. I love the adrenaline, and I love being graded instantly each weekend. And it's kind of, I don't know, it's almost like the adrenaline, I guess.
Yeah, it's cool. No, I agree. So you'll finish. So you'll go back. When do you go back?
Saturday.
Saturday?
So literally drive back Saturday. We'll start. Staff will be in next week, and then players the week after. So.
And then away you go.
And we are rolling full steam ahead. There's no break till October next year, hopefully.
And you will be under the highest pressure ever, in the sense that you've got to get your PhD. Like, usually, if my experience of deadlines is anything to go by, the closer you get to the deadline, the more the pressure ramps.
Yeah. So definitely next year's a massive year for me. I've got to finish my PhD, and I'll be out of contract as well with the team. So it'll be a combination of, again, trying to find that balance between academics and my supervisor put it the best way, I think, in terms of my PhD, which kind of changed my perspective. As long as I do good quality research, other clubs and other sports will notice you.
Yeah.
But if you only focus on doing a good job at work, then there's only one club who's looking at you. And so it's a really interesting thing that I hadn't thought of before.
That's previously. A great insight.
So it's kind of like you can put all that time and effort into this one club, and you might get a job out of this. And what I've learned, it just doesn't happen naturally like that. And so it's something I have to get better at this year, is putting a lot more time in my research and doing a good job there, so other places, other clubs will notice.
And I think creating that intellectual property, like developing that skill set, because one thing, delivering work where people value in the short time, you're still kind of trading time for money. Like, it's like, I'll do this good work this week, but I'm only as good as my last week, what I've done. Whereas there is an evergreen element to position yourself well with a relevant, much needed, like the area you put yourself in is perfect because it's never going to go out of fashion.
Yeah.
and delivering great work in that area, because that's like that the work you put into the PhD, that will still be paying off for you in 5 years' time.
Yeah.
Like it's because you'll still be able to talk about that stuff. It's really smart.
Yeah, I think that's the plan. That was always been the plan, is not to pigeonhole myself into sport and have something to fall back on if I don't end up wanting to work in sport long term. It's quite a grind. I think eventually you want to kind of settle down, as cliche as that sounds, and try and get away from the bubble. And the ability of having an academic side and academic background is that you are not totally there all the time, and that you can go away and you can talk about other subjects other than AFL and winning and losing and injuries and conditioning, and you can talk much more broadly about other issues in sport. And it's really refreshing for me. It just kind of makes me do a better job at work.
Yeah, because you've got a broader perspective.
Exactly.
And will you do further study afterwards, do you think?
My mum and dad probably hoping no. I think they'd like me to kind of start earning a decent wage. And it's a good question. I don't know what else there is. In terms of qualifications, I think I'll be at the top. I'll be what else can you do apart from PhD? Yeah. But in terms of like doing further research, definitely. I think I'll always want to. It's just a nice balance, like trying to find that sciencey side of it, and couple that with the practical side. And I think that sports really good, but it's still a lot of systems that can improve on, and the way we can kind of move from being a passion-based field into more of not an academic side, but more of like a corporate side setting. That's the way sports progressing in terms of the amount of money that's involved in it now. If we can run our systems and our structures like big business does, which is on obviously a completely another level, but if we can slowly progress towards that, I think that's kind of where we're heading in terms of, and that's where my passion is. I've got a business background. I've got kind of like a sport.
You've got a systems thinking background.
Yeah. And how we can logically structure stuff going forward. So
I love it. Before we wrap up, I've got one last question. So, you were here as part of the internship as a regular intern, then you did that senior internship, and you were great. And forever, it always feels like you're kind of part of the family here. Yeah. And you've been really good at just maintaining contact. So it wasn't like it was just out of the blue. Like every now and then you'll just tell us something we did was interesting, or you just keep some level of contact going. To what extent has that been that you treat that as because I think it's a massive skill, because as you go through your career, as you meet people and connect with them, to still just nourish those connections a little bit is often, it's the thing I'm rubbish at. I'll be so busy in the whirlwind that is trying to be a head coach, administrator, and all the other 16 jobs that I've got here. But I don't do a very good job of that at all. Is that a strategic thing, or is that just you became attached here, so you stayed in touch?
Yeah, I don't think it's anything I've planned. I've just kind of I've followed you guys since you guys started the podcast, and I've watched all of Jacob's vlogs.
Did we start the podcast before or after? We started after. Yeah. Right.
It was definitely after, and it kind of picked up off following you off social media, and it's just, I think it's naturally because I love the stuff that you guys do here, and I think you guys are world class, right up there with the Exos and in the like it. And I think that the way,
for the record, I feel like we're nowhere near that, but we're trying. Like where we are world class is how hard we're trying.
Yeah. But you guys I think I learned a lot from you guys, not just in terms of S&C, but in terms of just like life experience. We spent a big part of the internship, or was when I was there, was expanding on life skills. And, whether it's from your list of books that you recommend everyone reads to, I had no idea what a podcast was until I started here. Right. Yeah. Ironically, I'm now on the podcast.
I love it. That's full circle.
Kind of exactly, full circle. And I think if people make an impact on my life, I like to stay in touch with them. And you guys made a significant impact on my life. The people at the Blues made a significant impact on my life. And I feel it's really important. And I'll stay in touch with everyone I've worked with in sport, just because I feel like they've all had some sort of part to play in where I am now. And I think that's really important. And I get it from my dad. He'd hate me saying this, but he's the biggest he's most outgoing person I know. And I've never been like that. It's kind of naturally happened. Over the last years, I've grown in confidence, and I've been
palpably grown
to
in
Sydney.
Confidence. Like, it's been lovely to observe that. Like, it's really good. Like you've found your groove.
Yeah, it's awesome. I'm living the dream at the moment and loving it. So
awesome. All right. Well, thanks for joining us. And if I can, I don't think there are many show notes, but if we can think of any, we will put some links in.
Maybe just my Instagram page.
All right, thanks, Pat.
Thanks, mate.
All right, cheers, guys. See ya.